Sure. Here's the expanded version of None Part 1. In simple, natural language with a human-centric tone, keeping it engaging and free from any policy violations. Life wasn't easy for Lila Harper. Growing up in a small town where everyone knew each other's business, she learned early on how to keep her head down and push forward. Her parents worked long hours at jobs that barely paid enough to cover their bills, but they never complained. They taught her that hard work could get you far, even if life threw its share of challenges your way. From a young age, Lila dreamed of something bigger than what her hometown offered. She didn't want to spend her days working odd jobs or settling for less just because it was expected of her. So when she graduated high school, she packed a battered suitcase, hugged her parents goodbye, and boarded a bus headed toward the big city. The promise of opportunity and maybe a little adventure was too tempting to ignore. The city turned out to be exactly as overwhelming as she'd imagined. Bright lights, crowded streets, and people who seemed so focused on their own lives that they hardly noticed anyone else. At first, Lila struggled to find her footing. Rent was expensive, and finding steady work felt impossible. But she refused to give up. She took whatever gigs came her way, cleaning offices late at night, delivering packages during the day, and occasionally helping out at a local bakery before dawn. Eventually, she landed a job as a waitress at an upscale restaurant called the Velvet Fork. It wasn't glamorous and the tips weren't always great, but it gave her a sense of stability. Plus, there was something satisfying about serving customers who appreciated good food and service. Over time, Lila grew more confident in her role. She learned to read people quickly, figuring out which tables needed extra attention and which ones preferred to be left alone. She became known among regulars for her warm smile and sharp memory, remembering orders without needing to write them down half the time. But while Lila was busy building her life one paycheck at a time, someone from her past had taken a completely different path. Years ago, she'd fallen head over heels for a guy named Ethan Caldwell. He was smart, ambitious, and full of ideas that seemed larger than life. Back then, he was just another college dropout trying to figure things out, much like herself. They had connected instantly, sharing dreams of making something meaningful out of their lives. Late-night talks under starry skies, stolen moments between shifts, and promises whispered softly into the darkness. All of it felt real. Then one day, Ethan disappeared. No explanation, no warning, nothing. Just gone. For months, Lila waited for him to come back, holding on to hope that he'd return with some kind of answer. But as weeks turned into months, and eventually years, she realized he wasn't coming back. Heartbroken and confused, she tried to move on, convincing herself that she deserved better anyway. Deep down, though, part of her still wondered why he'd left and whether she'd ever see him again. Fast forward to the present, and Lila is standing behind the counter at the Velvet Fork, tying her apron strings tightly around her waist. It's another busy Friday evening, and the restaurant is buzzing with chatter and clinking glasses. As she glances around the room, taking stock of her assigned tables, she notices a man sitting alone near the window. Something about him seems familiar, but she can't quite place it. Maybe it's the way he holds himself, confident, yet unassuming, or perhaps it's the faint hint of nostalgia tugging at the edges of her mind. Curious, Lila grabs a menu and heads over to greet him. "Good evening," she says brightly, forcing a polite smile. "Can I start you off with something to drink?" The man looks up, distracted by whatever document he's reading on his phone. When his eyes meet hers, though, everything stops. Time freezes. His expression shifts slightly, and for a brief moment, Lila feels like the floor has dropped out from beneath her feet. Those piercing blue eyes. She knows them. Her stomach flips, and her hands tremble as she tries to focus on jotting down his order. But her mind is racing. Could it really be him? After all these years? The resemblance is uncanny, but she doesn't want to jump to conclusions. Not yet. Still, the nagging feeling won't go away. This man sitting calmly in front of her might very well be the same person who once held her heart in his hands and walked away without looking back. For now, though, she pushes those thoughts aside. Professionalism kicks in, and she forces herself to finish taking his order. As she walks away, her heart pounds in her chest. Whatever happens next, one thing is certain. Tonight is going to change everything. This expansion keeps the story, flowing naturally, adds depth to Lila's character, and sets the stage for the emotional twists ahead. Let me know if you'd like me to continue expanding the next parts. Sure. Here's the expanded version of Another Right, Part 2. Written in simple, natural language with a human-centric tone, it's designed to keep the audience engaged while staying policy-compliant and avoiding any AI-like feel. Lila couldn't shake the feeling as she walked away from the table. Her hands trembled slightly as she entered the order into the system, her mind replaying every detail about the man sitting by the window. Those blue eyes, that confident yet reserved demeanor. It was all too familiar, but how could it be him? After so many years, after all the pain and unanswered questions, why would he show up here of all places? She tried to focus on her other tables, but her thoughts kept drifting back to him. Every time she glanced over, he seemed engrossed in his phone or reviewing papers spread across the table. He didn't look like someone who remembered her, or maybe he simply didn't care. That thought stung more than she wanted to admit. When the drinks were ready, Lila hesitated before picking up the tray. She took a deep breath, reminding herself that this was just another customer, just another night at work. Nothing special. Except it wasn't. This moment felt anything but ordinary. As she approached his table, her heart raced. "Here you go," she said, placing the glass of water and wine in front of him. Her voice wavered slightly, betraying the calm exterior she was trying so hard to maintain. "Thank you," he replied without looking up, his attention still fixed on whatever document he was reading. For a split second, Lila considered walking away, but then something stopped her. Maybe it was curiosity, or maybe it was the years of unresolved emotions bubbling beneath the surface. "Excuse me," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. The man finally looked up, meeting her gaze. His expression shifted almost imperceptibly, though whether it was surprise or recognition, she couldn't tell. "Yes?" he asked, tilting his head slightly. Lila faltered, suddenly unsure of what she even wanted to say. What could she possibly ask? "Do you remember me? Do you know the pain you caused?" Instead, she forced a polite smile and nodded toward the menu. "I just wanted to make sure everything is okay with your order." He studied her for a moment longer than necessary, and Lila felt exposed, as if he could see right through her. Carefully constructed mask. Then he nodded slowly. "It's perfect, thank you." For a brief moment, their eyes locked, and Lila swore she saw a flicker of familiarity in his gaze. But before she could dwell on it, he turned his attention back to his papers, effectively dismissing her. She mumbled a quick "you're welcome" and hurried away, her cheeks burning with embarrassment. Back at the counter, Lila leaned against the edge, trying to steady her breathing. What was wrong with her? She'd dealt with countless customers over the years, some far more intimidating than this guy. So why did this particular encounter leave her feeling so unsettled? Her co-worker, Rachel, noticed her distraction and nudged her gently. "You okay? You've been acting weird ever since that guy showed up." Lila forced a laugh, brushing off the comment. "Yeah, I'm fine. Just tired, I guess." Rachel raised an eyebrow but didn't press further. Instead, she tilted her head toward the man's table. "He's kind of handsome, don't you think?" Lila froze, her stomach twisting into knots. Handsome? Sure, he was attractive, that wasn't the issue. The problem was that she knew him, or at least, she used to. And now, seeing him again after all these years, it felt like reopening a wound she thought had healed. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Lila avoided looking directly at his table, focusing instead on her other customers. But no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't stop thinking about him. Each time she delivered a plate or refilled a drink, part of her wondered if he'd recognize her. Would he say something? Apologize? Explain why he left without a word? When it was finally time to bring out his entree, Lila hesitated outside the kitchen doors. She gripped the plate tightly, steeling herself for the interaction. As she placed the dish in front of him, their fingers brushed accidentally. A jolt of electricity shot through her, and she quickly pulled her hand back, muttering a quiet, "Careful, it's hot." This time he looked up immediately, his eyes locking onto hers. There was no mistaking it now, the spark of recognition was undeniable. His brow furrowed slightly, and he opened his mouth as if to speak, but then stopped himself. "Is everything all right?" Lila asked, her voice trembling despite her best efforts to sound composed. He stared at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Finally he spoke, his voice low and hesitant. "Lila." Her heart skipped a beat, hearing her name from... His lips sent a wave of conflicting emotions crashing over her. Anger, sadness, disbelief, and a tiny sliver of hope she hadn't realized she still carried. "Yes," she managed to reply, her voice barely audible. "That's me." The man's shoulders sagged slightly as if a weight had settled onto them. It's really you," he murmured, more to himself than to her. Before Lila could respond, another server interrupted, asking for help with a nearby table. Grateful for the distraction, she excused herself, leaving him staring after her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. Later that night, as Lila lay in bed staring at the ceiling, her mind refused to quiet down. Why was he here? Did he regret leaving? Or was this just some cruel twist of fate? She tossed and turned, replaying their brief interactions over and over again. One thing was clear. This wasn't going to blow over easily. Seeing him again had stirred up feelings she'd buried deep inside, and now they were threatening to spill out. Meanwhile, across town, the man sat in his penthouse suite, staring out at the city skyline. His mind was equally restless. He hadn't expected to run into her, not here, not like this. And yet there she was, looking just as beautiful as he remembered. Only now, she seemed stronger, more self-assured. Not the same girl he'd known all those years ago. Guilt gnawed at him as he recalled the way he'd left things between them. He told himself it was for the best, that he was protecting her from his failures. But seeing her tonight reminded him of the truth. He'd been selfish. He'd run because he didn't know how to face her, how to explain the mess he'd found himself in. And now, years later, he was faced with the consequences of that decision. Neither of them slept well that night. For Lila, it was a whirlwind of anger, confusion, and lingering affection she didn't want to acknowledge. For him, it was regret and a desperate longing to make things right. Little did they know this chance encounter was only the beginning of a journey neither of them could have anticipated. This expansion dives deeper into the emotional turmoil both characters experience, making the story relatable and engaging. Let me know if you'd like me to continue with the next parts. Here's the expanded version of Part 3. Written in simple, natural language with a human-centric tone, it's designed to keep the audience hooked while staying engaging and policy-compliant. The next day, Lila woke up feeling like she hadn't slept at all. Her mind was still racing with thoughts of the man from the restaurant. She replayed their brief encounter over and over again, his hesitation when he said her name, the way his eyes had searched hers for answers she wasn't ready to give. Was it really him? And if it was, why had he come back now, after so many years? She tried to distract herself by focusing on her routine, showering, getting dressed, making coffee. It was all meant to ground her, to remind her that life went on no matter what. But nothing could shake the unease settling deep in her chest. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw his face, the same one she'd once loved, the same one that had haunted her dreams for years after he left. When she arrived at work later, that evening, Rachel immediately noticed her distracted demeanor. "You're acting weird again," she teased, nudging Lila playfully. "What's going on with you?" Lila forced a laugh, brushing off the comment. "Nothing, just tired." But Rachel wasn't convinced. "Is it that guy from last night? The one who looked like he recognized you?" Lila froze, her heart skipping a beat. How much did Rachel know? Had she pieced together more than Lila wanted her to? She shook her head quickly, trying to deflect. No, it's not him. I barely even talked to him. Rachel raised an eyebrow, but didn't push further. Instead, she smirked knowingly before heading off to check on her tables. Lila let out a quiet sigh of relief, though she knew avoiding the topic wouldn't make it go away. As the dinner rush began, Lila threw herself into her work, hoping to drown out her thoughts. Taking orders, delivering plates, refilling drinks, it was all mechanical, almost soothing in its predictability. For a little while, she managed to forget about the man who'd stirred up so many emotions. That is, until she glanced toward the entrance and saw him walking in. Her stomach dropped. He was here again. This time there was no mistaking it. He'd come back specifically for her. His gaze scanned the room until it landed on her, and for a moment they simply stared at each other. Then he approached the hostess stand, speaking quietly before being directed to a table. In her section. Great. Lila thought bitterly. Just great. She took a deep breath, steeling herself as she walked over to greet him. Welcome back, she said, forcing a polite smile. Can I get you something to drink? He looked up at her, his expression softer than it had been the night before. Actually, can we talk? He asked, his voice low and hesitant. Privately, if possible. Lila hesitated, torn between curiosity and caution. Part of her wanted to scream at him, demand answers for everything he'd put her through. Another part, a smaller, quieter part, wanted to hear what he had to say. Finally, she nodded. After my shift, she replied curtly. I'll meet you outside. Seemed relieved, nodding in agreement before turning his attention to the menu. Lila walked away, her mind spinning. What could he possibly have to say that would justify abandoning her without a word? Whatever it was, she wasn't sure she was ready to hear it. The rest of her shift felt endless. Every task took twice as long, every interaction dragged on forever. Her coworkers noticed her distraction but chalked it up to exhaustion or stress. By the time she clocked out, she was both dreading and desperate for the conversation waiting for her. Outside, the cool night air hit her face, offering a small reprieve from the heat of the kitchen. He was standing near the corner, his hands shoved into his pockets. When he saw her, he straightened up, his expression nervous but determined. Thanks for meeting me, he said, stepping closer. I wasn't sure you'd agree. I almost didn't, Lila admitted, crossing her arms over her chest. So what do you want? Why are you here? He sighed, running a hand through his hair. I owe you an explanation. For everything. Lila laughed bitterly, shaking her head. An explanation? After all these years? You think that's enough? No, he admitted quickly. It's not enough. Nothing I say will ever be enough to make up for what I did. But I need you to know why I left, and why I'm here now. For a moment, Lila considered walking away. She could turn around, leave him standing there, and never look back. But something stopped her. Maybe it was the vulnerability in his voice, or maybe it was the lingering hope that somewhere deep down he still cared. Whatever it was, she stayed silent, waiting for him to continue. I left because I was scared, he began, his voice trembling slightly. Scared of failing, scared of dragging you down with me. I didn't have anything to offer you, not stability, not security, nothing. So I convinced myself it was better to leave, to protect you from the mess I was in. Lila stared at him, her jaw tightening. Protect me? You call leaving me without a single word protection? Do you have any idea what that did to me? I know, he said softly, his eyes filled with guilt. I messed up. I should have told you the truth instead of running. But at the time, I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I was sparing you pain. Well, guess what? Lila snapped, her voice breaking. You caused more pain than you could ever imagine. Years of wondering, doubting myself, thinking I wasn't good enough. Did you ever stop to think about how I'd feel? Or were you too busy building your perfect life? He flinched at her words, looking genuinely remorseful. I never stopped thinking about you, he admitted. Every day I regretted leaving, but by then it felt like it was too late. I didn't know how to fix things or if you'd even want me to try. Lila turned away, tears pricking at the corners of her eyes. She hated that he still had this effect on her, that after all these years, his presence could unravel her so completely. "Why are you here now?" she asked finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "What do you want from me?" "I don't expect anything," he replied honestly. I needed to see you, to apologize, to tell you that I'm sorry for everything." His sincerity was undeniable, and for a moment Lila felt the tiniest flicker of forgiveness. But it wasn't enough, not yet. Too much damage had been done, too many years wasted. She shook her head, taking a step back. "I need time," she said firmly. "Time to process all of this. Don't contact me unless I reach out first." He nodded, understanding written all over his face. "Of course. Take all the time you need." With that, Lila turned and walked away, leaving him standing alone in the dim light of the street lamp. As she made her way home, her mind raced with conflicting emotions: anger, sadness, confusion, and beneath it all, a tiny spark of hope that, maybe, just maybe, they could find a way forward. But for now, she needed space. Space to heal, to think, and to decide whether forgiveness was even possible. Little did she know he wasn't ready to give up. Not this time. And as fate would have it, their paths were far from finished crossing. This expansion delves deeper into the emotional weight of their confrontation, keeping the tension high while exploring themes of regret, redemption, and unresolved feelings. Let me know if you'd like me to continue with the next parts. Here's the expanded version of Part 4. Written in simple, natural language with a human-centric tone. It's designed to keep the audience engaged while staying relatable and policy-compliant. The days that followed were a whirlwind of emotions for Lila. She couldn't stop thinking about the conversation outside the restaurant, the raw honesty in his voice, the guilt etched across his face, and the way he'd looked at her like she was still the center of his world. Part of her wanted to believe him, to let herself feel something again after years of burying those feelings. But another part, the stronger, more cautious part, reminded her of the pain he'd caused. Trust wasn't something you gave lightly, especially not to someone who'd broken it before. Still, she found herself replaying his words over and over. "I never stopped thinking about you." Did he mean it? Or was it just an apology meant to ease his own guilt? Either way, it didn't change the fact that he'd left her without a word, leaving her to pick up the pieces of her shattered heart all on her own. Despite her resolve to take time and process everything, life had other plans. 2 days later, when Lila arrived at work, Rachel greeted her with raised eyebrows and a knowing grin. "Your friend is here again," she teased, nodding toward the dining area. Lila froze, her stomach dropping. Sure enough, there he was, sitting at the same table as before, scrolling through his phone with a distracted look on his face. This time, though, he wasn't alone. Another man sat across from him, clearly engrossed in their conversation. A business meeting, Lila realized with a mix of relief and disappointment. At least he wasn't here specifically for her, or so she thought. As the evening wore on, Lila avoided his table as much as possible, focusing instead on her other customers. But every time she glanced in his direction, she caught him watching her. His gaze lingered longer than necessary, filled with a mixture of longing and regret. It made her uncomfortable but also curious. Why was he coming back? Was this some kind of game, or did he genuinely want to make things right? After finishing her shift, Lila grabbed her coat and headed for the exit, hoping to slip out unnoticed. But as she pushed open the door, she heard footsteps behind her. Turning around, she saw him standing there, his hands shoved into his pockets and his expression hesitant. "I wasn't sure if you'd talk to me," he admitted, taking a step closer. "But I needed to try." Lila crossed her arms over her, chest, her defenses rising instantly. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice tinged with frustration. "Haven't we already said everything there is to say?" "No," he replied firmly. "We haven't. Not even close." For a moment, they stood in silence, the cool night air wrapping around them like a blanket. Finally, he spoke again, his voice softer this time. "Look, I know I messed up. I can't undo what I did no matter how much I wish I could. But I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere. Not unless you tell me to leave." Lila stared at him, torn between anger and confusion. "Why should I believe you?" she demanded. "How do I know this isn't just another empty promise?" He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "You don't," he admitted, "and I don't blame you for doubting me. All I can do is show you, through my actions, not my words, that I've changed, that I'm willing to do whatever it takes to earn your trust back." His sincerity was hard to ignore, and for a brief moment, Lila felt the walls around her heart begin to crack. But old wounds ran deep, and forgiveness wasn't something that came easily. "Actions speak louder than words," she said finally. "So prove it. Show me you're serious." From that point on, he started showing up regularly, not just at the restaurant, but in other parts of her life too. He attended community events she helped organize, offering to lend a hand whenever needed. He supported local charities she cared about, donating both his time and resources without expecting anything in return. And most importantly, he listened, really listened, when she talked about her dreams, her struggles, and her fears. At first, Lila remained guarded, unsure whether his efforts were genuine or just a temporary act. But as the weeks turned into months, she began to see glimpses of the man she used to know. The one who'd once dreamed alongside her, who'd promised her the world, and believed they could achieve anything together. Only now, he seemed different. More grounded, more self-aware, and determined to make amends for the mistakes of his past. One evening, after a particularly long day at work, Lila found him waiting outside the restaurant. Instead of heading straight home, she agreed to grab coffee with him, a small concession, but one that felt significant nonetheless. As they sat across from each other in a quiet cafe, the tension between them slowly began to ease. "You've been doing a lot lately," Lila said finally, breaking the silence. "Volunteering, helping out with events. Why?" He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "Because I want you to see that I'm not the same person I was back then. I've grown, Lila. I've learned from my mistakes, and I'm trying to be better, for you, for myself, for anyone who deserves better than what I gave them before." Lila studied him closely, searching for any hint of insincerity, but all she saw was honesty, raw, unfiltered, and vulnerable. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to entertain the possibility that maybe, just maybe, he truly had changed. "Thank you," she said softly, surprising even herself. "For trying, I mean. It doesn't fix everything, but it's a start." A flicker of hope lit up his eyes, and he nodded gratefully. "That's all I ask for. A chance to start over, to show you that I'm worth trusting again." They parted ways that night with a tentative understanding. Neither of them expected miracles overnight, but they were willing to take things one step at a time. Slowly but surely, cracks began to form in the walls Lila had built around her heart. While she still had doubts, about him, about them, about the future, she couldn't deny the spark of connection that lingered between them, refusing to fade completely. For the first time in years, Lila dared to imagine a future where forgiveness wasn't just a dream, it was a possibility. But rebuilding trust would take time, patience, and effort from both sides. And as they navigated this fragile new chapter, neither of them knew what lay ahead, but they were ready to face it together. This expansion delves deeper into the emotional complexity of their relationship, highlighting the challenges of rebuilding trust while keeping the story engaging and relatable. Let me know if you'd like me to continue with the next parts. Here's the expanded version of Part 5 Euro, written in simple, natural language with a human-centric tone. It's designed to keep the audience engaged while staying relatable and policy compliant. Months had passed since that first tentative coffee meeting, and slowly but surely Lila began to notice changes, not just in him but in herself too. At first she'd been hesitant, almost defensive, whenever he showed up unannounced or tried to involve himself in her life. She didn't want to let her guard down too quickly, fearing another heartbreak if things fell apart again. But as time went on, his consistent efforts started to chip away at the walls she'd built around her heart. He wasn't perfect, far from it. There were moments when old insecurities crept back in, reminders of the pain he'd caused years ago. Sometimes she'd catch herself wondering if this was all some elaborate act, a way for him to ease his guilt before disappearing again. But then, he'd do something unexpected, something small, yet meaningful, that made her question her doubts. One evening, after a long shift at the restaurant, Lila found herself exhausted and overwhelmed. The day had been chaotic, with demanding customers and endless orders piling up one after another. By the time she clocked out, all she wanted was to go home, crawl into bed, and forget about everything. But as she stepped outside, she saw him leaning against his car, holding 2 steaming cups of coffee. "I thought you might need this," he said, handing her one of the cups with a sheepish smile. Lila blinked, caught off guard by the gesture. "You didn't have to do that," she said softly, though she couldn't hide the gratitude in her voice. "I know," he replied, "but I wanted to." They sat together on a nearby bench, sipping their drinks in comfortable silence. For once, Lila didn't feel the need to fill the quiet with words. Instead, she let herself relax, allowing the warmth of the coffee and his presence to soothe her frazzled nerves. In that moment, she realized how rare it was for someone to simply be there without expecting anything in return. It wasn't just random acts of kindness that stood out, though. He also made an effort to understand her world, the challenges she faced daily, the dreams she still carried in her heart, and the fears that lingered beneath the surface. One afternoon, while volunteering at a local community center, he noticed how passionate Lila was about helping kids from underprivileged backgrounds. Without saying a word, he reached out to his network of contacts and secured funding for a new program aimed at providing free tutoring and mentorship opportunities. When Lila found out what he'd done, she was speechless. "Why would you do that?" she asked, her voice thick with emotion. "Because it matters to you," he said simply, "and because I want to support the things that make you happy." His words struck a chord deep within her. For so long she'd convinced herself that she didn't need anyone, that relying on others only led to disappointment. But here he was, proving her wrong in the most unexpected ways. Slowly, she began to let him in, bit by bit, sharing pieces of herself she'd kept hidden for years. Still, trust wasn't something that came easily. Even as they grew closer, lingering doubts continued to haunt her. Late at night, when sleep eluded her, she'd lie awake replaying every interaction, analyzing every word he'd ever said. Was he truly committed to making things right? Or was this just a phase? What if she gave him her heart again only to have it broken once more? One evening, during a rare moment of vulnerability, Lila decided to confront her fears head-on. They were sitting on her apartment balcony, watching the city lights twinkle in the distance. The air was cool, and the faint hum of traffic below provided a soothing backdrop to their conversation. "What happens if we try again and fail?" she asked suddenly, her voice trembling slightly. "What if I'm not strong enough to handle losing you twice?" He turned to look at her, his expression soft but serious. "I can't promise that we won't face challenges," he admitted. "Life has a way of throwing curveballs no matter how prepared you are. But what I can promise is that I'll never walk away again, not unless you ask me to. Whatever comes our way, we'll face it together." His words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. For the first time in years, Lila allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could find a way forward. It wouldn't be easy. Rebuilding trust required patience, effort, and a willingness to forgive. But she also knew that love wasn't about perfection. It was about choosing to stay, even when things got hard. Over the next few weeks, their relationship continued to evolve. They spent more time together, rediscovering the connection they'd once shared while navigating the complexities of their present. Conversations flowed more freely now, filled with laughter, shared memories, and occasional tears. There were still moments of tension, times when old wounds resurfaced and threatened to pull them apart, but each time they chose to work through it, refusing to let fear dictate their future. One day, as they strolled through a park hand in hand, Lila felt a sense of peace she hadn't experienced in years. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over everything, and for the first time in a long time she felt hopeful about what lay ahead. Turning to him, she smiled, a genuine, unguarded smile that reached her eyes. "Thank you," she said softly, "for sticking around, for trying." He squeezed her hand gently, returning her smile with one of his own. "Always," he replied. "No matter what." As they walked off into the fading light, neither of them knew exactly where this journey would lead. But one thing was certain, they were ready to face whatever came next, together. This expansion focuses on the gradual rebuilding of trust and emotional connection, highlighting both the challenges and triumphs along the way. Let me know if you'd like me to continue with the final part. Here's the expanded version of Gun, Part 6. Written in simple, natural language with a human-centric tone, it's designed to bring the story to a satisfying conclusion while keeping it engaging and relatable. Months turned into a year, and life for Lila and the man who had once walked out on her began to feel like something entirely new, something neither of them had dared to hope for after everything they'd been through. Their relationship wasn't perfect. No relationship ever is. But what made it special was the effort they both put into making it work. For the first time in years, Lila felt like she was part of something real, something built on honesty, trust, and mutual respect. One evening, as they sat side by side at a charity gala hosted by his foundation, Lila couldn't help but marvel at how far they'd come. The event was glamorous, filled with well-dressed guests mingling under sparkling chandeliers. Tables were adorned with elegant centerpieces and soft music played in the background. Lila herself looked stunning, wearing a fitted navy blue dress that complemented her features perfectly. She'd spent hours getting ready, not because she felt pressured, but because she wanted to look her best. For him. As the night wore on, Lila found herself chatting confidently with people she might have once felt intimidated by. Business executives, philanthropists, artists, they all seemed genuinely interested in hearing about her work at the community center and her passion for helping others. Watching her from across the room, he couldn't help but smile. This was the woman he'd fallen in love with all those years ago. The same woman who now stood taller, prouder, and more self-assured than ever before. During a break between speeches, he excused himself from a conversation and made his way over to her. "You're amazing, you know that?" he said softly, his voice carrying just enough warmth to make her blush. Lila laughed lightly, brushing off the compliment. "I'm just doing my job." "No," he insisted, shaking his head. "This is more than that. You've always had this incredible ability to connect with people, to inspire them without even realizing it. I see it every day, and I'm so proud of you." His words caught her off guard, but in the best possible way. For so long she'd doubted her worth, convinced that she wasn't good enough or strong enough to handle the challenges life threw her way. But here he was, reminding her of everything she'd overcome, and everything she was capable of achieving. "Thank you," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper, "for believing in me, even when I didn't believe in myself." He reached for her hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. "Always," he replied. "No matter what." Later that night, during a toast to the success of the gala, he stood up to address the crowd. As he spoke about the importance of giving back to the community and supporting causes close to their hearts, his eyes kept drifting toward Lila. When he finished speaking, he raised his glass high and offered two simple words meant only for her. "Thank you." The sentiment behind those words carried profound meaning, Not just gratitude for her presence in his life, but also an acknowledgement of the journey they'd shared. They'd started as two broken people, each carrying scars from the past. But together they'd managed to heal. Not completely, perhaps, but enough to move forward with hope instead of fear. After the event ended and the guests began to leave, Lila and he lingered behind, enjoying the quiet calm of the empty ballroom. Standing near the window, they watched the city lights shimmer against the dark sky. "You know," Lila said thoughtfully, breaking the silence, "I never imagined we'd end up here." "Neither did I," he admitted, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "But I wouldn't trade it for anything." She leaned into him, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat beneath her cheek. "Do you think we'll be okay?" she asked quietly, voicing a question that had lingered in the back of her mind for months. "We will," he promised, his voice firm yet gentle. "Not because we're perfect, but because we're willing to fight for each other. That's what makes us stronger." In that moment, Lila realized something important. Love wasn't about finding someone flawless. It was about embracing imperfections and choosing to grow together despite them. Over the past year, they'd faced countless challenges, moments where doubt and fear threatened to pull them apart. But each time they'd chosen to stay, to communicate openly, and to remind themselves why they mattered to one another. As they left the venue hand in hand, stepping into the cool night air, Lila felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. The road ahead wouldn't always be smooth, but she trusted that they could navigate whatever came their way, as long as they faced it together. A few weeks later, as spring began to bloom, Lila woke up early one Saturday morning to find him, already awake, sitting by the window with a cup of coffee in hand. He looked deep in thought, his gaze fixed on the horizon as if searching for answers to questions only he understood. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, joining him on the couch. He smiled, setting the cup aside. "Just how lucky I am," he said simply, "to have you in my life again, to have a second chance." Lila felt a lump rise in her throat, but she swallowed it down, choosing instead to focus on the present. "We both got a second chance," she reminded him, "and we're making the most of it." He nodded, pulling her closer. "That we are." From that day forward, they continued to build a life rooted in understanding, forgiveness, and unwavering support. They celebrated small victories, weathered storms, and learned to cherish the moments that truly mattered. Together, they proved that love, real, authentic love, could withstand even the toughest trials, as long as both hearts remained open and willing to try. And so, their story became one of redemption, resilience, and renewal. A testament to the fact that sometimes the hardest journeys lead to the most beautiful destinations. This final part ties up loose ends while emphasizing growth, healing, and the power of second chances. Let me know if you'd like any further adjustments.